Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson, and welcome to Books That Make You Better. I'm a professor of construction management, and this is one of the series that I like to work on because I'm an avid reader myself. And so I like to review different books, especially related to leadership, productivity, management, and improvement. This particular session is going to be on Cal Newport's slow productivity. Slow productivity. And I particularly like Cal Newport, his work. He's written a number of books. Probably the one he's most known for is Deep Work, which I think came out around 2015, 2016. He's also written a number of student books prior to that, one called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. Really good book, especially for students or people that are starting off in their careers. But this book, he really dives into a lot of different things, and I found it a very enjoyable read. Some key points or breakdowns. This is pretty much the overview of the book and how it's laid out. It's a pretty simple book. I actually got the hard copy. I don't get many hard copies anymore. I usually read it off my iPad. But I really appreciate the work that Cal's done, and I knew that he probably put a lot of work into sort of just the way the book is sort of framed, the cover, all of that information. He has a podcast, and if you're interested in his work, I'd suggest you check out his podcast. One of my favorite podcasts. He always has, at some points he has guests, but mostly it's him discussing points that have to do with deep work, slow productivity, digital minimalism, A World Without Email. These are previous books of his, combined with student learning and other aspects, because he is a Wharton professor. And one thing you know is that he spent a lot of time researching these topics. I get the sense, and he's been sort of alluding to that more and more on the podcast, that he struggles with these things himself. And so that's why it's interesting for him to make them topics. I find the same thing because I do a lot of productivity videos on construction management. I struggle with a lot of things, and that's why I like to walk through it. I like to try things, test things, and then I like to talk about it because it also makes me think about my own systems, my own goals, and my own way of doing things. So this book definitely helped me to think about these things and work through them. I don't always agree with everything that Cal says, but I understand his viewpoint. And I think one of the categories this book really sort of identifies with is what he refers to as the knowledge worker. So that's where it may differentiate, from my typical viewer, a construction management individual or somebody involved in construction or in the trades, because there are some nuances between what a knowledge worker is and what a construction professional does, and what the opportunities are. So I'll try to spread those out a little bit in this review and give my own take and spin on a few things, as I always like to do. Key points: foundation, the rise and fall of pseudo productivity, and basically what he means by pseudo productivity. Well, we'll unpack that a little bit as we go, but looking busy but not really doing stuff. A slower alternative. Principles, so foundations, that's in the principles. He does a really good job of background. Principles: do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over qualities. And these are all chapters. And you know what? There's nothing expressly new. And people sometimes, I was reading on Goodreads before I do a review, I look on Goodreads and see what people's takes are. And some people are maybe hard in the sense that, there's nothing new here and blah, blah, blah. But he's putting it together in a framework. And I think individually there's nothing new, but I think his take and framework is new. And it's not new to him, of course, because he's kind of been building this up. It reminds me a little bit of Jim Collins. If you look at Jim Collins' Good to Great, How the Mighty Fall. I just did the Flywheel review previously. I'll try to leave a link below. If you listen to Jim Collins' work over a lifetime, a lot of these things, they start to connect all the dots. And I have that sense with Cal, because I think his next book is on basically the deep life, or he's pondering exactly how he's going to put that together, at least in his podcast. And so these are components that fit together. And so that's what I like about that. And again, I don't agree with everything necessarily, but I really like the approach, and there's a lot that I do agree with. It was written during the pandemic, so that's always interesting because there's always different takes of what's going on. He's got comments on quiet quitting and that sort of stuff, but that's, a small component of it. He's very good at explaining how we got here, with busyness, the knowledge worker being expected to do certain things, and at a certain point it just seems like you're spinning wheels and you're looking very busy, but you're not accomplishing that much. And that's what he would describe as being not productive, right? And he uses John McPhee, and John McPhee comes up a lot. Tim Ferriss, if you ever watch his podcast, he's always talking about John McPhee because John McPhee was a professor of his in writing. And, Tim Ferriss has done pretty good in that area, although he does not profess to be any great writer. He definitely has been quite successful writing books and being creative and innovative. But John McPhee, very sort of slow productive, takes a long time to put together a New Yorker article. He's written a number of books, takes a long time to crystallize this, and it's spread out over months and years. But you look at, so individually, you look at, wow, that took a long time. Wow, that was really a long time. But you look over a lifetime, because I think McPhee's in his 80s, like what a body of work he has and quality. And so this is that exemplar of slow productivity. He has lots of examples throughout history that he uses in the book. I can't list them all, but there's a lot of examples. He does a lot of quotes. Like I said, he's well researched. This quote, "We are overworked and overstressed, constantly dissatisfied and reaching for a bar that keeps rising higher and higher," writes Celeste Headland in Introduction to Do Nothing. I like that. There's a lot of new materials that he quotes that I haven't seen or read, and usually I know if he's done some research on it that it's usually pretty good. So that I always then follow up, and then usually there's checks and balances. I'll check Goodreads, etc., and see how that works out. So there's a lot in this sort of slow down environment that he's talking about. So basically the philosophy is these three areas, which he broke down into those chapters that I mentioned: but do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. And so I'll unpack some of that. But first, he really gets into, in the introduction, defining productivity. He wants to be clear that this book is not, making widgets on an assembly line. This is not how, he's not talking about going slower on an assembly line. He brings up, obviously, the difference between productivity of a knowledge worker and productivity in, say, manufacturing and construction. You can go to a better definition. So he uses Taylorism, Frederick Taylor, basically looking at ergonomics and how we can improve the flow of things back in the early 1900s. And of course, Fordism, with the assembly line. And those were good things as far as improving in manufacturing. And there were metrics that you could measure productivity in. There's metric: how many bricks did you lay in a day? How many square foot of flooring did you install? How many linear feet of piping? These kind of things like manufacturing and construction, you can have some pretty good quantitative data that you can measure. Pretty good. It's very objective. In knowledge work, it's not so easy. It's sort of like, what are we measuring? Are we measuring emails that you sent? Are we measuring drawings that you produced, perhaps? But sometimes looking at that, you produced a lot of drawings, but there was a ton of, and so related to constructions as an example, you produced a lot of drawings, but there's a ton of errors in them, and this is causing a lot of rework. So we're crediting you for being productive by producing more drawings when we have a lot of problems with them. So knowledge work, that side of it, and components, I would say, in the management and construction, there's some things that we do that are really important, and then there's some things that we do that aren't as important. And what are we measuring, and how are we measuring it? Not so easy. So this is where he's really into, the aspect of not trying to do more, but to do what you do better, right? Without being a perfectionist. He talks about perfectionism. I've talked about perfectionism on different videos as well. So that's part of that. The knowledge worker cannot be supervised closely or in detail. And this is written by Peter Drucker, I'm assuming in the 1960s. That's why the he term. He can only be helped, but he must direct himself. And so this is that self-motivation, intrinsic motivation aspect, that you have to be able to motivate yourself, and you have to prioritize things yourself. So there's these elements in productivity that it's not so easy to measure. And he talks about Drucker, he talks about how he came up with some ideas on it, but really wasn't able to clarify it. And this is one of the problems that we have with productivity, pseudo productivity. They send lots of emails, attend lots of meetings, have opinions, at these meetings, but never. I've seen this so much in my career. I've had managers way in the past. I had one going back, a good person, heart was in the right place, but honestly, looked busy all the time. But if you got down to it, it was a lot of wasted effort. It was a lot of superficial things without getting into the core things, doing the right things and doing them well. Because you couldn't, because you're so scattered. And this is why we have so much burnout. And so this is kind of looking at unpacking these kind of things with a lot of case examples of how that really makes a lot of us struggle in a lot of the jobs we do. And so I liked about that unpacking of that, right? And so, and he even gives some example, and some maybe a little bit of a stretch, but they're interesting. They make you think. That's what I like about his examples and the way he writes. McDonald's in Italy, response, slow food. So there was this area in Italy, and I forget if it was Rome, and they were wanting to put in this huge McDonald's that would seat literally hundreds of people, like a mega McDonald's. And of course, if you've been to Italy, the food is fabulous, right? At least for me, I love Italian food. And there was a lot of pushback, and the response was something called slow food, where we're not in a hurry to make the food. We want to make it that it's like a ritual, that it's something to be enjoyed in the process. And of course, it was a way of countering this rush, high productivity. How fast can you get the burger out? I'm thinking of getting a burger right after this, but not at Mix, just up the street, where they actually do make a very nice, and they're not in a rush. I usually have to go for like a 20-minute walk when I order it, which is nice. Historical examples. Okay, so in history, we do have lots of, a lot of the things that were done. I just finished Benjamin Franklin's autobiography by Walter Isaacson. And there's a lot of historical examples that, wasn't necessarily in a rush for certain things and slowed it down and took longer, but accomplished a lot. So he sort of unpacks some of those examples, like Marie Curie, how she would take a few months off, actually take a few months off. And today it's like you can't take 5 minutes off. It's like go. If your calendar's not completely booked, what are you doing, right? And so it's a different kind of viewpoint. But, history, there have been changes, but it's sort of like a pushback against some of the, fit everything in, do more, really pushing back on that. So do fewer things. Strive to reduce your obligations to the point where you can easily imagine accomplishing them with time to spare. Leverage this reduced load to more fully embrace and advance the small number of projects that matter the most. And so I had this bookmarked in here, and I was just going to read it to you because it kind of resonated with me. If you know what I do, and if you look at that flywheel video, you'll kind of see how that fits in there, that I shot about a month ago. Moving in the other direction. It's hard to maintain 5 or more missions, like doing a lot of things, without feeling you're drowning in unavoidable work. This might sound like a lot of objectives to take on, but it's easier than you might imagine to allow your commitment count to grow over time. I'm guilty of this. My friend Jenny Blake, for example, writes in her 2022 book, Free Time, about how her small consulting training business kept expanding until one day, exhausted by the demands of work, she looked up and realizing she was supporting more than 10 different sources of income streams, which she describes as legacy from years of experimenting. No amount of clever time management or streamlining tactics can keep the work required to maintain 10 missions tractable. After Blake began fantasizing about winning the lottery or burning it all down, she realized she had to simplify if she had any hope of achieving sustainable and meaningful professional life. She slashed her income streams and reduced her staff to only 3 part-time employees. She now works on average 20 hours a week and takes off 2 full months each year for vacation. It's likely, of course, that Blake would be making more money if she hustled to support more missions. When you're enjoying 20-hour work weeks, however, it's hard to care too much about such possibilities. So it's a little bit different view. But I think when you read a book like this, you can look at that. And I know myself, what I've done in the past is I've cut income streams that bug me. So where I have what we'd call friction, and where I'm not enjoying it as much. And generally, I've also looked at other income streams where I probably wasn't charging enough. And so I've cut some that really annoyed me, and I've upped my pricing in other ones that I could now pay a better attention to, and actually that are more in my wheelhouse where I do a better job, and maybe I wasn't charging enough, and come away actually partly ahead. So that's something that wasn't really mentioned, but I think was implied. Like myself, I was doing some counts when I was reading this, and I have like 9 income streams, I'd say. And I honestly feel there's 1 or 2 in there that I could put to retirement or take out. And it just gives me some fuel for thought that way. And you do have these legacy ones that you've always done them and this and that. And they were nice. Maybe they're a nice client, but it's just that it's just too much. And it's not worth the time and the effort anymore to be doing that. So you got to be thinking about, and I like move from friction to flow. And if you do lean construction like I do, you know flow is a big term, and friction is like the obstacles, things that get in your way. And sometimes there's too many things that you're trying to accomplish. So which things should you cut? And there's usually things you can cut. So that's a very, very strong point in there. And I love this term that he calls overhead tax. And he talks about this a lot on his podcast as well. You know, when each project you have, so each one of those income streams that is mentioned there, or that I have, you know what? There's friction with each one of them. Each one has meetings. You have to set up schedule dates. You have to set up presentation dates. You have to set up times with the publishers. You have to set up doing a YouTube video, you know, just the actual thinking about it. There's all the time I've got little thoughts going on with that. I can see why some influencers quit at a certain point, because maybe they've got enough, they can do other things and that sort of thing, because maybe they find that's too much friction. I actually enjoy this, but I mean, there is for each thing. And so if you've got 4 things, maybe not too bad. If you got 9 things, maybe crazy. So each one of these things, there's a mental it's the stuff when you're doing something else that's gnawing at you. I should be sending such and such an email, right? Everything creates things. And I think about Charlie Munger's quote with construction, that not just construction, that with companies, he mentioned that that's Warren Buffett's partner that recently passed away. Brilliant person that basically said that more companies die of indigestion, right, than starvation. What he meant by that is by just trying to do too many things, and then you blow up, right? So because you don't end up doing anything well and you lose all your customers, or you've got cash flow issues. And that's especially true in construction. So overhead tax and, all of those things create everything, all of these particular items. So think about that in your particular case. Less breadth, less prep. So do what you're really good at. Now, I had this problem because, as I said, I'm a professor of construction management. And going back, there was a time where I had this opportunity to coordinate a building science program at University of Toronto. Tier 1 university, globally recognized, really good. But you know what? Building science is not my I will never be a building science professor, or at least a top tier university or a high level. In construction management, I can be. In building science, that's and so that's a stretch. That's breadth. It's good, but it's too much breadth. I know enough, but to go beyond that, I don't have the time without losing the other, and the other is my wheelhouse. So why would I? And so that cutting that one loose was a good thing for me. That was a good thing for me, right? So that, that required a lot less stress, a lot less overhead tax, and that sort of thing. So not being so scattered. He also talked about lean. He didn't use lean so much, but he talked about agile because he's a computer science professor. So he talked about pull systems, which was Kanban systems, right? Like Trello, where basically you can, you have certain things that are things that you need to do, all right? You have things that you're doing, and you have things that are done. And you don't have very much that you're doing at any one time, but you're fully focused on them, then trying to do 10 different things at once. That's basically one of his systems, which is a widely known system that I've discussed many times with pull planning, lean construction methods, and I'll continue to discuss going forward. But I like that he put that in as part of his overview of that. And I know he's a big fan of pull planning from his podcasts. Principle number 2, work at a natural pace. And so again, this is stuff that I talk about too. Make a 5-year plan. You know what? And know that 5-year plan may change, right? Nobody is basically a forecaster, perfect forecaster. But make a 5-year plan. Work in that direction. Double your project timelines. This ties to, he didn't mention this, but ties to Daniel Kahneman's planning fallacy. We all think we're going to do things in a lot faster time than we do. Even with the planning fallacy, we still have problems. Even if we double our timelines, there's this Parkinson's law that comes into effect. But still, really catching yourself on being overly optimistic with how long you're going to take to help to reduce your stress loads. I was thinking of that when I was doing this up, because I committed to something, to have something by the end of this week. And I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, oh, right? Simplify your workday. Well, this all of this stuff doesn't help if you don't look at, well, how do I simplify your workday? Well, you simplify your workday by time blocking certain times of things. He's a big fan of time blocking your calendar and not having spare times, buffers. We talk about that in lean construction too, having some buffers in there. If you chock a block every second of every day, it's very, very stressful. You don't take everything in, balls drop, right? Which is going to tie to the next one, which is obsess over quality. Schedule slow seasons. Well, even in construction, we have slow seasons, slower seasons than busy seasons. Usually winter, at least in Canada, it's depending the work you're doing, it's slower than summer. Summer, you've got the stuff that you could do outside and inside, and winter, you're mostly doing the inside work. You're trying to set yourself up that you keep yourself busy over the winter, but you're not doing as much. And there's certain things you can't do outside, like roads and landscaping and things of that nature. So schedule slow seasons. And that also means scheduling time off, breaks for yourself to recuperate, to rethink things. Principle 3, obsess over quality. An unusual choice because I haven't read about Jewel before, and it was a really good choice. So because sometimes you read these books and they repeat the same story of the same person over and over again. And it's sort of like, well, did they just get it from the other book? Because it's got to be more stories. So I like that he brought this one about Jewel because I haven't really seen it anywhere before. And she started out, in a family in Alaska. Really sort of backwoods, doing music in sort of different bars and things with her mother and father, and got really good and could yodel and, really good voice control. Was kind of discovered by somebody at one of the music schools, came down to the big city. I forget where the big city was, whether it was Chicago or Boston or somewhere in there. And, went to school there, developed even better, but still a little bit rough. Very simple in how she would run things, and very light, not expensive, how she would try to make money, but pretty much working out of her car. And saw this coffee shop that was about to go under, partnered with the coffee shop owner to say, hey, if I bring people in, can I get a cut? And so she started out, and there was 2 people, and then 4 people, and 10 people. And after a few months, they were like lined up around the block to listen to her sing in this coffee shop. Got a record contract as a result, and the record producer wanted to give her $1 million, basically signing bonus. Well, basically it's an advance, so it would come off your sales. And she did some background research on it, and she felt that she wasn't ready, she wasn't good enough yet. She signed the contract, but she didn't want the advance. She was smart enough to say, I want a bigger cut of the proceeds from the records than I want an advance, right? And that was good with the publisher, because the publisher, a lot of times they give $1 million advance, and the record's a flop, and they don't get nothing, and then they just drop the person. And she didn't want to be dropped. She figured they wouldn't drop her if she took her time and did things. And she did an album, Neil Young's Ranch, and it didn't really fly that well. It had some of her good songs, but she really wasn't there yet, a little bit nervous. Worked it some more over the next couple of years, and then made the album that made her millions and millions, and the record company millions and millions of dollars. So that's a good one. And her grandmother apparently had this saying, hardwood grows slowly. And so that's, really master your craft, work at it, and become valuable, and obsess over quality. We all know Steve Jobs has been quoted many times. He quotes him too. Deciding what not to do comes back to Apple, ditches like most of their products to really hone in and focus and being the very best at certain products and being very innovative without having a million different products, right? So quality requires that you slow down. And then he has a conclusion that kind of pulls it together. I think it's an excellent book. So, but again, if you're expecting sort of the usual sort of productivity, which is how do I squeeze more stuff into my week, you're not going to get it in this book. So then I don't think you'd be happy with it. But if you're looking for something different that's really going to get you thinking, that's where I think he has his niche. That he's got a different take on things, and it makes a lot of sense for him and what he does as a college professor. But again, you got to look at what he's able to produce. He's produced, I think he's written about 7 or 8 books. Full-time college professor, has an ongoing podcast, and does speaking engagements. How do you do all those things? Well, he will say that he doesn't do them all at once. He has certain time frames that he's doing things, and then he's focusing on them. Like, he doesn't tend to write the books during basically the semesters. He tends to do it over the summer, right? That's one of his things. But I'm sure he's quite busy because even me, I'm pretty good at this stuff too. And I look at it and I think, wow, that's a lot there. But I think he's also smart enough that he does hire some help with it, or something that I could do a little bit of work with on those things. But anyways, that's what I wanted to cover for this. Hopefully it wasn't too long. If you're still here, though, I'm glad you are. And please click subscribe. It helps me grow this community. It helps the channel. And click like and the comments, what everybody always asks at the end of these videos. So I'm Tom Stephenson, hoping that you're going to learn better, learn more, and I was going to say learn faster, but I won't say learn faster because we want to be basically focusing on quality, right? Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.